Nigel's conspiracies.
Large parts of this county will end up underwater if we don't deal with
That
this issue.
is just scaremongering.
It's not scaremongering.
It is.
Venice
It is.
flooded.
It is. We had Al Gore saying that, somewhere where he's just built a big palatial house right on the beach is going to be underwater. He wouldn't have done that if that was the case. It's
It
just
is scary,
scaremongering.
but it's not scaremongering.
It is scaremongering.
I am very scared for my future.
Of course you are, because you've been brainwashed. You've been brainwashed.
I've been brainwashed by GCSE science. No,
Yes.
I've been brainwashed by the IPCC. This is
Yes.
what the scientists believe. To the best of
Not
their
all
understanding.
scientists.
97%
Okay,
of scientists.
Unfortunately for the climate denier, the thought of the entire country and world being taken over by climate change and its effects is so scary, she'd rather attack the person than the people causing the problem. And interestingly, we're going to see Nigel Farage on BBC 5 Live have that debate as well. And we're going to see him go into conspiracy territory once again.
On the climate emergency, I'm really, really into science.
Are you? What, sunspots, volcanic activity, all that sort of thing?
Really, really like it. But listen, there's 99% scientific consensus on this. There's more scientific consensus on anthropogenic climate change being destructive to the planet than there is on smoking causing cancer, which you may be interested in. But listen, it says on your prospectus, CO2 is essential for photosynthesis to enable plant growth. CO2 only represents 0.04% of the atmosphere. The average garden greenhouse has 3 times more. Nigel Farage, you will have to change this before you publish it, because it's like something you find on a dodgy American link on YouTube. It's absolute scientific hogwash.
But should we really be that surprised that Nigel Farage is following Americans and American conspiracies?
What percentage of CO2 that's produced every year is man-made?
It's a trace gas, CO2, for a start. And the most harmful outcome of rising atmospheric CO2 on vegetation is climate change itself, drought, heat stress, which would overwhelm any... But hang on, that's the science.
All right, no, listen.
And I know you've been niggling with sort of young earth creationists in America and stuff like that.
Get out of it.
So it is interesting that comes up, and it's a little snipe at Nigel, but it is going to come up a little bit later on with some of the scientists I'm going to put forward to some of Nigel's more extreme claims.
I'm getting out of nowhere.
I am not having any scientific debate on it at all.
Well, you can't, because the science is overwhelmingly showing that the climate is changing rapidly, significantly, and to a lot of damage.
Is that man produces about 3% of the CO2 produced in the world every year. All right,
and it's a vital 3%.
And that it is nuts to call CO2 a poison. Now, that's all I will say on the science.
As is the norm with Nigel, he says he's not going to talk about it, then he starts talking about it, and then he starts saying words that aren't used by the scientific community, such as the word poison. And poo-pooing the fact that it's 3% being produced by man is so little, he actually seems to disacknowledge the fact that that little amount is causing a huge amount of change.
What is perhaps more important is this. Well, this really is important. Net zero is deindustrializing our country.
It's not more important because of what's happening to the planet.
Well, have a listen. Okay, fine.
Send me some YouTube links.
No. I'm not arguing the science with you.
Except you just did, which you heard. This is all typical Nigel Farage conspiracy theories / rhetoric in order to win an argument.
I'm arguing the impact of what we are doing, which is an enormous act of economic self-harm.
And if we don't do it,
we're irrelevant. We're irrelevant.
But we're global leaders.
Some British patriotism for you there.
No, we're not.
We're at the cutting edge of technology.
Do you know, Mr. Modi, who's just been re-elected as the PM in India, one of his election boasts, for the first time, we've produced 1 billion tonnes of coal.
Any increase in the production and burning of coal is not good. However, if you look at this graph, which is showing the UK in blue and its CO2 production versus that of China, we dwarf them in comparison.
No, hang on. Is it worth us committing an act of self-harm if all we're doing is exporting the CO2 production
What it is
somewhere
worth
else?
is being at the top table with these people and saying, let's all move together slowly, because if we all move together slowly, it's going to have a massive
But they're
effect.
not
It's
moving.
not about you, it's not about me, it's
They're
about
not
the callers.
moving.
It's
They're
about
not. I want.
Well, they're not going to move if we do nothing. If we do absolutely nothing, they're certainly got to.
Well, would
not
you?
gonna move.
Okay, Nicky Campbell. Would you rather we import steel made in India or make steel ourselves?
He makes it sound as if going for net zero is the problem with us not being able to produce our own steel. That's not quite the case. If India and China have a workforce of over 1 billion, their labour costs are going to be cheaper. If they decide to be a totalitarian regime and they have less worker rights and they can force people into employment, unlike in a democracy, they are going to be able to produce that steel at a cheaper rate. Now, for national security reasons, I don't see too much of an issue of actually producing our own steel, but to say that we can compete and sell at the same scale as India and China is fanciful. Now, I am going to go into the conspiracy realm with Nigel, because it's not until the end that he sort of loses his grip a little bit and starts telling us what he really thinks.
As the planet heats up, the equatorial area, a great band of country around the equator, will be uninhabitable. And the migration then around the world will be enormous.
You ain't seen nothing yet.
We've had climate change for millions of years. You know that.
Not
I
at this
know that.
rapidity.
And we have liftoff with his conspiracies. It's been going on for millions of years. Now, he is right in what he's saying. We've had it since the dinosaurs. The big problem with saying something like that is that it's not useful for current day events. And the big thing he misses, and it makes me wonder if he's being financed by some sort of oil oligarch, is the fact that it might be a good idea for us to start working towards some sort of plan to try and control the environment, to keep things balanced, to look after and protect our green and pleasant land, but he doesn't seem that interested in doing it.
We've had climate change for millions of years. You know that.
Not
I
at this
know
rapidity.
that. How do we know?
After stating that he knows that for millions of years there's been climate change, he now questions as whether or not we're having an impact, and on top of that, whether or not it's ever been as rapid as this. Well, we do know because we're able to take ice core samples which can date back thousands of years. We can even look at the fossil record, we could look at fossilized leaves, look at the stomata in them and see what their CO2 levels are, giving us an indication of what the CO2 level was thousands and if not millions of years ago.
How do we know?
Throw out the graphs, right? I mean, can you...
How do we know?
I refer to this.
How do we know?
Okay.
You can take your cue from the rest of the animal and plant kingdom. Animals are migrating in different rates. Plants are migrating north that never made it north before because they can now sustain the warmth that is there. They're plants that are getting fertilized earlier than before. The migration patterns have shifted. So nature is telling us nature already knows the answer to what it is everyone here is arguing about.
Our scientific knowledge of this is very small.
Our scientific knowledge is very small. I always find this bit the funniest and the most conspiratorial. It's funny how Nigel is live on air with the TV pointed at him using computers. But that science is okay. We have the development of robots, medicines. You might as well be arguing over the validity of E equals mc squared, or gravity. As is the usual Nigel, it's all about the conspiracy and the story, not the actual data and the facts.
Believe what you want. The problem comes about is if you believe what you want and you are responsible for the governance of the nation. I'd like to think that governance is based on objectively verifiable truths. Otherwise, what kind of culture have you created? What have you done? What is that? I don't know what that is, but it's not an informed democracy.
And when you live and try and make a world like that, no wonder you get things like Brexit. Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and once again, thank you to all of my Patreon and YouTube supporters. You really do keep this channel going and growing. If you'd like to help out, please look at the link in the description. Thanks for listening. Bye for now.